Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. And we've got some news today that will surprise and shock you from around the world, looking at what's going on in the Middle East, of course. We'll do that. Some stuff out of China that's going to, I think, really surprise you. It surprised me when I heard about it. And interesting developments and intrigue going on in Canada between some of the premiers. Let's jump right into it. Some of you may wonder, as I have at times, why there's so much back and forth in the negotiations between President Trump and Iran. And one side will say something, looks like there's a deal, and then another side comes back and says, no, there's no deal. One of the big problems as it's emerged, and even Iran talking about today, is that their supreme leader, as you know, Mojtaba Khamenei, and Mr. Khamenei is the son of the other Khamenei who was blown into eternity, some saying blown into hell, in the initial attacks a few months ago. It's been rumored for a while that he wasn't even alive. It seems that he is alive, and it seems that rumors are also true that he's severely disfigured when he was hit in a bombing attack in which some of his own family members were killed. And because he knows he is still on the hit list to be killed, because he is an extremist, Islamist, murderer, terrorist, not a lot of nice names to be known by, but that is the case. He is in hiding, so much so that even his top officials don't know where he is. So even getting the message to him, a proposal will come out, and it has to go through all kinds of secret tunnelways and through individuals that people don't even know. And then he gets the messages, and then he has to look at them, and then he has to follow a secret route to get the message back, all resulting in these delays and back and forth. So we'll see what happens with that, but it's really continues to cause problems. But some good news for the anti-Iranian side, and that would be the U.S. side and the Israeli side, and, well, people like me, quite frankly, and others who would like to see this come to an end and would like to see the Iranian Islamist regime they will absolutely use a nuclear bomb if they have it. I'd like to see that shut down. I'm sure you would too. But they've got a new ally has emerged here, and it's Somaliland. Somaliland is in that Middle East region, and they say that they are going to be allowing military setups and military sites to be set up to stop the Houthis. The Houthis are one of the groups like Hezbollah and like Hamas that are funded by the Islamist terrorists out of Iran. And while the Strait of Hormuz is being blocked to some degree, there are some alternate waterways, especially one around the Red Sea. That is where Somaliland has considerable control. So positive news here about possible ongoing opening of the sea lanes with alternate routes as Somaliland steps up. And it should be noted, this is quite a brave move on their behalf. They are a small country. They will put themselves at risk of the Houthis and these other vicious terrorists. But a positive note in the ongoing development. It's also news, there's news stories out about something we have talked about and known about for some time, and that is that the Iranian terrorist regime starts their recruiting and uses very young people, usually young boys, sometimes young girls, to recruit, to train them to hate Jews. And you can see some of these interviews that I have on the documentary that I did about Israel following the attacks on October 7th. You can find those on my website at stockwellday.com. Some of those were YouTube has tried to suppress some of those, but they are fact and they are out there. And there's something called the World Organization of the Scouting Movement, largely supported. This isn't the normal scouting movement, but largely supported by Islamic and Muslim groups. And they are the ones that train. Their headquarters is actually in Kuala Lumpur, interestingly enough, or one of their headquarters there. And they are training, we've known this for a while, and it's coming to light and can be verified, training very young kids, not just how to transport explosives, but at times, to be used as those with explosive strapped to their own bodies, and they are sent in to be very, very young terrorists in every sense of the word. When in fact they are killed in their duties, these young kids, their families are paid great amounts of money, and the kids are written up as heroes. So next time you see a group on your street that are praising Iran and are supporting Hamas and are supporting these other groups, you might want to ask them if they like the fact that they're supporting the slaughter of children and the making of martyrs of children. Well, as we watch the record now for Donald Trump in terms of the candidates that he supports that are running for Senate that'll be coming up this fall, it continues to increase. And in the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton was lining up and has been lining up against Senator John Cornyn in Texas. Cornyn's very popular among his own followers, but Trump had thrown his support behind Ken Paxton. Everybody said, well, there's no way Paxton's going to win because the existing senator is very popular. Anyway, Paxton won. And it's one more on the notch, I guess, if you look at it on the belt of Donald Trump in terms of candidates he endorsed tend to win. The concern on this one is he's let's say a shaky resume and a bit of a shaky past, been involved in some things that are being reported that are less than stellar. And now the concern is that this is going to give the Democratic choice, who's already been selected. Remember, we've talked about him, Representative James Tallarico. He's the rising star in the Democrat Party. He's the one who proclaims to be a Christian. He uses the Bible to endorse abortion. He uses the Bible to endorse and says the Bible supports same-sex marriage. And he actually says God himself is non-binary. In other words, God himself flips back and forth between male and female. He states these things quite openly. But people are saying that Tallarico is a rising star, and because he is seen in a better light among his own fellow Democrats than Paxton is among Republicans, he actually has a chance. Now, the Republicans have won that particular Senate election in Texas for 40 years, and we're going to see what develops in that. With all the cause and concern that you hear, quite rightly, about shootings in the U.S., and there should be concern. Chicago always has a terrible record of shootings. This weekend, the Memorial Day weekend in Chicago, 25 people shot. 25 people were shot. Some are in hospital. We don't have a death count yet. And this is a fairly normal weekend in Chicago. So when mainstream media, as they tend to do, go ballistic when there are other, let's say, cases of people being shot, and they say that we should, in the U.S., they should, just take away guns from everybody. And it's largely black community shooting black community. It's a heartbreak. It's terrible. And Chicago has had a black mayor for many, many of its years, and Democrat mayors, and they don't seem to be concerned about the shootings of their own people in Chicago. 25 people shot in Chicago over Memorial Day weekend, and not too much being said about that by the Democrats. Well, looking at emerging situations in Canada, it's been interesting to see, and you may be aware of the situation revolving First Nations in Canada. A lot of debate going on about First Nations lands and what lands are theirs. There's a meeting of premiers that's going on right now discussing concerns related to the federal government, and a bit of a debate or a bit of an argument broke out between the Premier of Alberta, that's Danielle Smith, and the Premier of Manitoba, who is First Nations. And Premier Smith has said over the last couple of days she thinks the Constitution of Canada should be looked at and, in fact, amended. Yes, we still should be able to, and still should be looking at First Nations consultation when it comes to major projects. But there are First Nations groups that are trying to sue Alberta because they're going to have a referendum on whether there should be a vote, in fact, on separation. And she's saying that's going too far. It's extending rights to First Nations groups that were never intended in the Constitution. So once again, she stakes out territory, the only premier in the country who would dare to say anything that might not be 100% correct relative to First Nations. Going along with that, there are new reports today, and you can check that out. There's reports in the National Post about the fact that church burnings continue to go on, and mainly on First Nations reserves, First Nations land. And that's been going on since 2021, when the Kamloops, the so-called Kamloops residential school, bodies were reported. Remember, it was said there was some 215 bodies buried underneath at the Kamloops residential school. That has ignited rage since 2021 among First Nations community. It's been reported around the world, and it's been one of the main reasons these churches get burned down, and increasingly those records are being challenged. And I am one, and many are, saying federal government should give the funding to the First Nations groups that are involved there to settle this question. The technology is clearly available, readily available, to determine what is below the ground, what shapes definitely what they are, what they constitute, and even the finding of remains with DNA now. So if it in fact that is the number, then First Nations group need to be reparations for this. There needs to be full-on proven apologies, not just based on speculation. And if it's not, then the whole issue should be put to rest, and people gain some kind of comfort from this. So more and more calls for the federal government. Why isn't the federal government helping First Nations in terms of using the technology available to unearth this sad situation? We'll see where that goes. And you might be interested, this is definitely a switch, but it's just want to jump back to something that Trump is doing again this month, and he's having a mixed martial arts world championship right on the White House lawn. The best mixed martial arts fighters in the world coming to fight on the White House lawn. And I mentioned that because there's it's come out now that a gentleman that was killed in Saskatchewan by a bear last month, it's now come out he is a mixed martial arts. He was a mixed martial arts champion, and he had come to Canada actually to hone his skills, to develop his skills, and was running a mixed martial arts training ground. And folks, I just say that because it is tourist season. If you're coming to Canada, people love to get up into the Rockies, and it is actually very safe, and it's a wonderful thing to get out into the wilderness. But if you do see a bear, please do not think you have the skills to take on a bear. You will inevitably be the loser on that front. Well, China has caught the world's attention because they are going to be launching into outer space very soon synthetic human embryos. This is human embryos that they've made. They are using stem cells from humans, and they make them into actual humanoids, and they want to see if the human embryos can survive in space under certain conditions, because China is saying, yeah, robots are one thing, but if you could develop humans synthetically that could survive in space, that would give you all kinds of advantage. So I'm going to let you decide if you think that's a positive thing or if it's a scary thing. We're going to see where that is going to go. And no question that's got a lot of attention here. Also, looking at emerging situation in the faith community, we are seeing, and I leave you this thought today, as there's so many issues and concerns around the world and things that cause people great anxiety. If you were a fan of Grey's Anatomy, the medical show that had a very good run, was very popular, and Sarah Drew, of course, who was the star in that, has recently shared that when she was facing some health issues and it was causing intense fear in her own mind and in her own heart, she said she got advice from her father, who was a pastor, and he said to her, why don't you start practicing aggressive gratitude, and that's intentionally and even aggressively being thankful for things and thanking people for things and being thankful to God for things. And she said it was a key factor in turning around her the situation she was dealing with on the health side, and has resulted in a real turnaround for her. Reflects a psalm I was looking at today. It says, those who look to the Lord actually become radiant. So with all the focus, quite rightly, on cosmetics and how you can have all the different kinds of things done on your face, I've been talking about that a lot the last couple of weeks here on the podcast, and maybe giving too much attention to that, because there are other ways, apparently, that you can be radiant. Look to the Lord. Have a great day, folks. Tune in tomorrow. Thanks very much.